The man lived alone for years, until 10 alien women wanted to stay in his house. The night had a sound to it, though Kael had spent years convincing himself it didn't. The hum of the power grid 2 towns over, the distant groan of wind turbines, even the faint static of satellites whispering across his receiver. All of it blurred into the white noise he used as a pillow. He sat at the window the way monks once sat at altars, his chair worn thin, his gaze fixed on the sky. He had grown used to the silence, to his own mutterings filling the air like accidental prayers. He knew the stars better than most people knew their neighbors. That was the arrangement. He stayed small, the universe stayed large, and no one bothered the other, until someone knocked on his door. He froze. The sound was so ordinary it felt obscene. A knock, sharp and deliberate, echoing down the quiet halls of his house like a gunshot. He waited for it to vanish, some trick of the wind or his memory playing pranks. But then it came again. Knock, knock, louder, impatient. He wondered if it was a courier who had finally gone mad looking for the address that no longer showed up on maps. Or maybe a government inspector checking whether he was still alive. He wasn't sure which would be worse. When he opened the door, 10 pairs of eyes stared back. They were not government inspectors. Not unless the government had radically changed its dress code and started equipping their employees with long, elegant ears that swept back like sails. The women looked human enough in the broad strokes, 2 arms, 2 legs, faces framed with hair, but their presence carried a weight that pressed against his chest. Not dangerous, exactly, just vast, as if each of them carried a piece of the cosmos in their gaze. One of them spoke first, her voice steady but laced with fatigue. Are you going to keep standing there like a broken hologram? Or will you let us in? Kael blinked. His brain decided the best response was, Another woman leaned sideways, peering into his house like she was judging a hotel lobby. This is it. Cozy. Smells like loneliness and canned beans. The one in front nudged her with an elbow. Mira, be polite. He hasn't thrown us out yet. Then she looked back at Kael and added, Will you let us stay? It should have been an easy answer. No, absolutely not. He had lived alone for years, and it worked. His house was calibrated for solitude. The shelves groaned with enough supplies to keep him alive until doomsday. His furniture was arranged for one body, and his comms were permanently set to receive only, allowing 10 strangers, 10 alien strangers, no less. Inside was the equivalent of detonating a black hole in the middle of his living room. And yet, there was something about the way they looked at him. Not begging exactly, but heavy with expectation, as if they had already measured him and decided he wasn't the type to say no. Kael cleared his throat. You're not here to sell me something, are you? Because if this is a pyramid scheme, I'm already at the bottom. A ripple of laughter broke through the group. The sound was strangely musical, like wind over glass. One of them, tall with silver streaks in her hair, shook her head. If we were saleswomen, you'd already be broke. We're much worse than that. We're house guests. They didn't wait for permission. The moment Kael stepped back, they surged forward, filling the narrow hallway with chatter, footsteps, and the faint hum of devices that had never been built on Earth. Within minutes, his carefully curated silence shattered like a glass dropped on concrete. Mira, the impolite one, marched straight to his kitchen, opened his pantry, and whistled. What did I tell you? Canned beans. Rows and rows of them. Who eats this many beans? Are you planning to start your own biofuel empire? Kael followed, sputtering. Those beans are personal. Another woman tugged at the hem of his sweater. Is this supposed to be clothing? Or a cry for help? She wrinkled her nose. Textile design on this planet is tragic. He tried to reassert control. Wait, hold on. Who are you? Where did you come from? Why me? The silver-haired one, who seemed to carry a quiet authority, placed a hand on the counter as if staking claim. We're travelers. Refugees, if you want the word humans use. Our vessel didn't make it farther. We need a place to stay. Somewhere out of sight. Your house is remote. Hidden. Perfect. Kael swallowed hard. Refugees. The word sat heavy, edged with stories he didn't want to imagine. He glanced around at the 10 of them, already making themselves at home, as if they'd been planning this invasion for months. His solitude cracked further with every sound they made: laughter, footsteps, the hiss of his kettle being commandeered. Finally, he muttered, "I should have pretended I wasn't home." Mira grinned at him over a steaming mug. She hadn't asked permission to pour. Too late. You answered the door. And just like that, the silence he had lived with for years was gone, replaced by the storm of 10 alien women who seemed to think his house was theirs now. Kael told himself it was temporary, a mistake that would fix itself in the morning. But deep down, a sliver of something new took root. Not fear, not annoyance, though both were present, but the faintest flicker of curiosity. The stars outside still watched him through the window, but for the first time in years, he wasn't watching back. By morning, Kael was convinced he had hallucinated the entire event. 10 alien women at his door? Ridiculous. Too much canned food, not enough human contact. That's how the brain makes mischief. But when he shuffled into the kitchen, bleary-eyed and desperate for coffee, he found the hallucination still there, very much alive, and currently dismantling his toaster. Mira waved a screwdriver like a conductor's baton. "Your appliances are prehistoric. I'm upgrading them before they stage a rebellion." Kael rubbed his face. "That toaster has been with me for 12 years. It's the closest thing I have to a marriage. Put it back together." Another woman, shorter with a cascade of midnight black hair, sipped coffee from his favorite mug. "He talks about toasters like they're people. Maybe he's lonelier than we thought." "I heard that," Kael grumbled, reaching for the coffee pot, only to find it empty. Empty. His morning lifeline gone, consumed by 10 beings who metabolized caffeine as though it were oxygen. The silver-haired one, who seemed to have taken command, gestured for him to sit. "We should explain ourselves. You deserve that much." "I deserve coffee first," Kael muttered, collapsing into a chair that was now surrounded by alien gadgets spread across his table. They glowed faintly, pulsing like breathing lungs. The leader inclined her head. "I am Celia. These are my sisters, though not by blood. We come from a fleet scattered by war. Our ship fell into your atmosphere damaged. We were lucky to survive. We cannot remain in the open. Will you let us hide here, at least until we can repair what remains of our vessel?" Kael stared at her. The words fleet, war, and atmosphere did not pair well with his quiet little house at the edge of nowhere. He tried to picture his future: 10 women with long ears squatting in his living room indefinitely, turning his home into a hostel for intergalactic runaways. He pictured himself 10 years from now, begging them to please stop reprogramming his microwave to speak 6 alien dialects. Celia watched him carefully. "You don't look convinced." "I'm a man who once argued with a raccoon over garden rights," Kael said. Convinced is a strong word. That earned a round of laughter. One of them nearly choked on a biscuit she had found in his cupboard. Despite the chaos, Kael noticed something beneath their humor: a sharp edge, a constant scanning of windows, a tension that vibrated through them like static. They laughed, they teased, but they were afraid. He wanted to ask what exactly was chasing them, but part of him feared the answer. Mira leaned on the counter, smirking. "Look, you're already hopeless without us. You didn't even notice we rerouted your power grid. If anyone scans this house, it'll read as abandoned." "You rerouted my what?" Kael shot up, panic seizing him. Celia raised a calming hand. "It's temporary. A camouflage field. The kind your governments won't detect for another 2 centuries. We're safe here for now." Safe. The word didn't sit well with him. Kael had spent years constructing safety out of silence, isolation, and canned beans. Now his safety was a bubble of alien technology humming in his living room. That night, his home sounded different. Music drifted through the air. Strange instruments that weren't physical. Tones woven from frequencies his ears barely caught. The women lounged in piles of blankets on the floor, arguing about which Earth food was edible. Mira insisted the beans would make them explode. Another swore bread was a soft mineral and should be classified as such. Kael sat in his chair, muttering that bread was fine, beans were fine, and could everyone please stop touching his toaster? Eventually, curiosity won. "Why here? Why my house?" he asked. eyes still on the stars through the window. Celia's voice softened. Because you're invisible, Kael. Hidden in plain sight. No one looks here. That makes you valuable. That makes us safe. The words crawled under his skin. Invisible. Hidden. He had chosen this exile, yet hearing it from someone else felt like a mirror shoved in his face. Later, as he tried to sleep through their laughter echoing down the hallway, Kael admitted a truth he had avoided for years. His silence had not been peace. It had been emptiness. Now, 10 strangers with long ears were filling that void with noise, and somehow, impossibly, the noise felt better than the silence. Still, he whispered into the dark, "If you touch my toaster again, I'm ejecting you all into orbit." And somewhere down the hall, Mira laughed as if she had heard him. Kael woke to the sound of drilling. Not the kind of drilling that suggested normal household maintenance, but the sort that made you wonder whether someone was opening a wormhole in the next room. He stumbled out of bed, hair sticking out in several tragic directions, and found Mira crouched in the hallway with half his wall removed. "Good morning," she said cheerfully, holding up something that sparked blue light. "Don't panic, but I've upgraded your insulation to quantum shielding." "That's my wall," Kael croaked. "My structural wall. That's supposed to keep weather outside and me inside." Mira shrugged. "Now it'll keep death rays outside too." "You're welcome." Before Kael could assemble a coherent response, 2 of the others zoomed past carrying what looked suspiciously like the remains of his washing machine. One of them called back over her shoulder, "Don't worry, we'll return it improved." Kael rubbed his eyes. This is how madness begins. By the time he reached the kitchen, Celia was there, calm as ever, sipping tea that wasn't hers. Around her, the others bustled like a construction crew from another dimension. Alien devices pulsed on the counter, wires ran across the floor like roots, and Kael's toaster, his poor, loyal toaster, was now glowing with an unsettling aura. "I didn't authorize any of this," Kael said, pouring himself the last scrap of coffee he could find. "You didn't stop it either," Celia replied, "which, in our language, is called consent by silence." "That is not how consent works." Kael snapped, then nearly burned his tongue on the coffee. Celia set her cup down. "We detected a signal last night. Encoded, faint but familiar. They're searching for us. We had to make your house unremarkable." Kael gestured at the chaos. "This doesn't look unremarkable. This looks like I'm housing a traveling circus of intergalactic electricians." Mira leaned in from the hallway. Better a circus than a funeral. That quieted him. For all the jokes, the reality pressed in. Someone was hunting them. His home wasn't invisible anymore, it was bait. He thought about telling them to leave, but the words tangled in his throat. He couldn't. Not now. Later that night, the house felt different again. The walls vibrated faintly with power. Lights shimmered in corners, where no lamp stood. The women sprawled across his furniture, some tinkering with handheld devices, others laughing at Kael's attempts to repair the washing machine they'd stolen. "You humans wash clothes with water," one said incredulously. "You drown your fabrics and then spin them until they're dizzy. Primitive." Kael tightened a bolt with unnecessary force. "It worked fine before you decided it needed a hyperdrive." "Don't be dramatic," Mira said. "We only gave it a low-grade temporal loop. Now your socks will always come out in pairs." Kael froze. You solved the missing sock problem." A grin spread across her face. "You're welcome." For the first time, Kael laughed. A real, startled laugh that made the women glance up in surprise. It felt strange in his chest, like using muscles that had long atrophied. He covered it quickly with a cough. "Don't get used to it." But they already had. As the evening deepened, Celia joined him by the window where he always sat. Stars glittered outside, patient and indifferent. "You wonder why we chose you," she said softly. Kael didn't answer. "It wasn't chance," she continued. "Your signal was clear. You live on a planet abandoned by its own people, yet you stay. Invisible, yes, but resilient. We needed someone who could hold silence without fear. That's why we trusted your door." Kael swallowed. "I didn't ask for this." "No one asks for survival," Celia said. "But it comes anyway." He had no reply. He looked at the stars and thought about how, for the first time in years, he wasn't watching them alone. When he finally turned in, he caught Mira sneaking toward his room, carrying a box of tools. "Don't even think about modifying my bed," he warned. She grinned. "Relax, Hermit. I'm just reinforcing it. You snore like a collapsing reactor. I'm making sure the frame can handle it." He groaned, shut his door, and muttered to himself that he was living in a madhouse. But secretly, in a corner of his chest he hadn't touched in years, he felt something dangerous blooming. He was glad they were there. Kael found his backyard transformed into what could only be described as a military playground designed by pranksters. Where once weeds and a lonely compost bin stood, there now rose humming towers made from his gutters, a satellite dish fashioned from his old bathtub, and what looked suspiciously like his lawnmower turned into a turret. The women bustled about with an energy that made Kael dizzy, shouting commands in languages his ears struggled to follow. "This is not subtle," Kael said, standing with arms crossed. "Subtle is when people don't notice you're preparing for war. Subtle is not my lawnmower shooting plasma bolts." Mira swung out from behind the machine, goggles on her forehead, grinning. "Relax. It only shoots on Tuesdays. We calibrated it." "I don't even know what day it is anymore," Kael muttered. Celia approached him, calm as always. "The signal is growing stronger. Their scouts will come soon. We have to be ready." Kael exhaled slowly. He thought about his quiet days of watching stars, about how simple they seemed now. He thought about telling them to pack up their chaos and find another hideout. But then one of them, the youngest, ran past him laughing, dragging cables twice her size, and he couldn't say it. He'd already lost his silence, and somehow, he wasn't mourning it anymore. By evening, the command center was declared operational. This command center, unfortunately, was his chicken coop. "You never had chickens," Mira pointed out, stringing glowing wires through the coop's roof. "So technically, this is an upgrade." Kael peered at the humming consoles, now wedged inside. "Upgrades usually don't smell like old straw." "Every empire begins humbly," she replied. "Ours just smells like poultry." The others howled with laughter, and Kael found himself chuckling despite the tightness in his chest. They weren't just building defenses. They were building something he couldn't name, something loud and alive. The first scout came at night. A shadow moved against the stars, a vessel gliding too low, its hull darker than the sky itself. Alarms Kael didn't know existed began to wail inside his house. The women sprang into motion, their long ears twitching with focus. "Positions!" Celia barked, her voice like steel. Kael froze in the doorway, heart pounding. He had never been in a war. He had spent years avoiding even a conversation. Now his home was about to be the front line. Mira shoved something into his hands. Heavy, humming, sparking faintly. "Congratulations, Hermit, you're armed. Point the glowing end at the bad guys." Kael stared at the device. "This looks like you glue my frying pan to a car battery." "Exactly. Dual function, cook eggs and vaporize scouts." He wanted to argue, but the scout ship descended lower, lights scanning the ground. His hands tightened on the ridiculous weapon. The first shot lit the sky, a beam of white carving across the night. Kael ducked instinctively, shouting, "I did not sign up for this." Too late. Mira yelled, slamming a control panel. His lawnmower turret roared to life, spitting plasma bolts that sizzled through the air. To Kael's eternal surprise, they hit. The scout reeled, its sleek body spinning, then limped back into the atmosphere. The backyard erupted in cheers. The women hooped, clapped, even hoisted Kael up despite his sputtering protests. "You did it!" Mira shouted, grinning. "I panicked and squeezed something." Kael shouted back. "That's basically strategy," she said. Later, when the adrenaline drained and the night fell quiet again, Kael sat at the window. His hands still shook, the frying pan blaster resting beside him. For years, he had been invisible, a ghost drifting through silence. Tonight, he had been loud. He had been seen. Celia joined him, her expression unreadable. More will come. This was only the beginning. Kael swallowed. "Then we're doomed." "Or," Celia said softly, "We're ready." In the hallway behind them, Mira called out, "And if all else fails, we still have the washing machine cannon." Kael groaned into his hands. "I'm going to die surrounded by lunatics." But when he lifted his head, he realized he was smiling. The night after the battle, Kael's house felt like the aftermath of a festival that had forgotten to clean up. The backyard hummed with faint sparks where the lawnmower turret had overloaded. The chicken coop command center was tilted at an alarming angle, and his frying pan blaster sat on the kitchen table like a trophy no sane man should own. The women lounged around the living room, swapping stories, repairing burns on their suits, and laughing too loudly for a group that had nearly been obliterated hours earlier. Kael sat in his chair, the one spot they hadn't stolen, staring at the stars through his window. For years, the stars had been his only companions, indifferent and silent. Now, when he looked at them, he felt something shift. They weren't just distant points of light anymore. They were places where enemies lurked, but also where these women had come from, carrying laughter and chaos into his hermit's den. Celia approached quietly, holding a mug of tea she had brewed without asking. "Their fleet won't return. The scout sent its final report before we downed it. To them, this planet is irrelevant, unworthy of another glance. We're safe." Safe. The word rolled strangely in Kael's chest. Safe used to mean silence, canned beans, and conversations with his toaster. Now it meant a backyard full of alien gadgets and 10 voices echoing through his halls. Mira plopped down on the armrest of his chair, nudging him with her elbow. "You fought with us. Admit it, you liked it." Kael grimaced. "I liked surviving. Big difference." She smirked. "Sure, hermit. That's why you shouted war cries at a scout ship while wielding kitchenware." "I did not shout a war cry," Kael protested. "You yelled. I'm too old for this." The room burst into laughter again, and Kael's protest melted into a reluctant grin. In the days that followed, the repairs slowed. The humming towers came down. The lawnmower turret was disassembled, though Mira swore she'd rebuild it as a fun project. And the washing machine was returned to something resembling laundry duty, except it now sang battle hymns while rinsing socks. The house didn't return to silence, but it settled into a rhythm, one Kael hadn't known he needed. One evening, as they shared a meal crowded around his once lonely table, Celia made an announcement. "Our ship is repaired enough to take us farther. We can rejoin what remains of our fleet. Soon we'll leave." The words fell like stones in Kael's stomach. He glanced at their faces, mischievous Mira, calm Celia, the younger ones who still argued about whether bread was edible, and something inside him clenched. He realized he didn't want them to leave. The thought of returning to silence now felt unbearable. But he didn't speak. He simply nodded, swallowing the ache. The day of departure came. The ship rose from the field behind his house, patched together with scrap metal, earth wires, and pieces of his garage door. The women stood before him one last time, long ears catching the wind. "You saved us," Celia said. "Not just with weapons, but with space. You gave us a home when we had none." Kael cleared his throat. "You also stole my toaster. Twice." Mira laughed, pressing something into his hands, a sleek device humming with quiet energy. "A communicator. If you get bored talking to kitchen appliances again, call us. But not during galactic daylight hours. We sleep in." One by one, they boarded the ship, their voices carrying back through the wind. Kael stood rooted, watching as the vessel lifted, glowing against the twilight. It rose higher, shrinking into the stars, until it was gone. Silence returned, but it wasn't the same silence as before. It wasn't heavy or suffocating. It was the silence of a house that had been filled, the echo of laughter still lingering in the walls. Kael sat at his window, gazing at the stars, and for the first time, he didn't feel small beneath them. He felt connected. He sipped his coffee, leaned back, and muttered, "Fine. Maybe solitude was overrated." From the kitchen, his washing machine sang a triumphant anthem, and Kael chuckled. The stars outside still burned with their ancient indifference, but he no longer watched them as a prisoner of silence. He watched them as a man who had opened his door and found the universe waiting. The end.